these will be the key skills that you need for your soundboard project. We'll have a second part tomorrow, but this should definitely get you through the majority of your project here. So let's start by opening Photoshop, and then we're going to open that wolf image that I pointed you guys to. So it's called download for me. Alright, so we have this image open, and depending on what your layout is, like maybe you would have a bunch of wolves on the screen, right, or some other objects, and depending on what you click on, it's going to do different things. So we want to have two appearances of this. So I'm going to first start by unlocking my background layer, and then I'm going to duplicate it. You can do that in two ways. You can drag it down to the new layer icon here, or you can right click it and you can then select duplicate. Let's try to get into the habit of naming these though. So if we name one wolf over, right, and that's going to come into play when we start working with our buttons, in that it's going to change color when we have that over state. This one I would probably call background. You drag it to the new layer icon next to the trash can, or you can right click it and there'll be a duplicate option there. So I'm going to have background, I'm going to have wolf up and wolf over, right? Because those are our button states. When we have our mouse like anywhere away from the image, that would be considered an up, and then when you're hovering over it, it would be something else. Alright, so we have three layers here now, and then I'm going to go in here and I'm going to then select the wolf using the quick selection tool on this wolf over layer. Alright, so I have this layer selected, I have my quick selection tool active, and then now I'm going to just go in here and I'm going to select the wolf. Make sure also that the plus is activated up here at the top, your plus brush. Alright, and that's the other thing we have to do. So actually let's go in here. So this is selected. We don't want the color to change on everything around this. We just want the color of the wolf to change. So I'm going to do select inverse to select the opposite, and then I'm going to do a delete. Now it doesn't at first glance look like it did anything, but if you go in here and you turn off your other layers, what you should see is that you have this layer kind of created here with the background removed. Alright, so now we have this image kind of isolated, or this part from the background. So now we're going to do a simple color overlay in order to give it a different appearance when we're rolling over it. So if we select this layer that has our transparent background, right, this checkerboard pattern indicates that it's transparent, so if you could layer that over anything. Alright, so if we go to the layer effects, which is down here in the bottom of your layer panel, and go to color overlay, alright, you get this window that pops up, and you can choose whatever color you want to put over the image by using the picker. So if I wanted to make it like a yellowish tone, I can do that. And then you have your opacity, which you can adjust, and also your blending mode. So normal would make it solid. I don't think that's really what we want. I think we definitely do want this blending mode of overlay. That way you kind of see the detail through it. And then you could even adjust the opacity more so if you wanted to. Alright, so that's going to be then creating this overstate. So I selected that layer and I went to layer effects and then color overlay. Alright, at that point we are pretty much done in Photoshop. What I would suggest for your actual project is make one big compilation, like kind of composite image for your soundboard. Alright, so you can see on this one, if I turn my layers back on, alright, this is going to be I did this project last year. It's my class reactions, as I'm calling it. So what I did was and I actually made folders for the different buttons. So this one here, my cricket sound, is made up of the two appearances, an over and a down state, or I'm sorry, an up and an over. So we have the cricket going from like a light gray to a dark brown, and then we have the text in there. So that's all within one folder. What's that? Yeah. It's like 2 years ago. It was very crowded with desks in here. But we can kind of simulate what's going to happen. All right, so if I looked at this this one here, our ding, all right, as I called it, so we can see there's my text, and then we have the appearances here of that. All right, so that would kind of simulate the up and the over. But anyway, so for our demo, all we're going to do now is save this as a Photoshop document. Let's call it Wolf Demo. All right, we want to save it as Photoshop to retain the layers. If we saved it as a JPEG image, it's going to flatten all those layers, and then we could never go back and edit it, or we'd have to redo everything. Nobody wants to do that, right? So we're going to save that. All right, I already have it open, I guess. Oh, and the other thing we want to check is our image size. All right, so that we don't have to do any rescaling in Animate. So if I go into the image pull down and check image size, I can see that this image measures 170 by 168. The size? Image and then image size. All right, everybody good with Photoshop? Should have these 3 layers. One has kind of this colorization to it. Just, we don't need to change it. We just need to take note of it so when we get into Animate, we can have the same size in there. All right, well. So now we're going to go into Animate. All right, so find Adobe Animate. And if I make a new document, this is probably what you guys kind of see. We're going to say ActionScript 3.0. And then under Modified Document, now we can change the size to match what we just created in Photoshop. So we said 170 by 168. It should be like right in the middle. Is really all you have to do is click the ActionScript 3.0. But let me see if I can see what you're seeing. I'm going to press Control-0 to maximize what's called the workspace to this window. All right, quick overview of Animate. Since most of you probably haven't used this. This white area here is what we call the workspace, your live area where you're putting all of your artwork. Down on the bottom is your timeline. This program is used primarily for animation, so that's why there is a timeline in it. We're not going to really be using that for this project, but just so that you know what it is. So you have play options, we have onion skinning, frame rate, all this other types of stuff. You can zoom in on the timeline by using this. More importantly, over here we have our toolbars. So you have your color, your swatch, alignment, information, scaling, motion presets, and then all of kind of your shape building stuff over on this toolbar. All right, so once our document's created, now we're going to bring in that Photoshop file. All right, so we're going to say File, Import to Library. All right, I always like to import to the library because if we delete it from the stage, then we can always just drag it back in from the library. Whereas if you just import to the stage, once you delete it, then you have to import again. So it is kind of like a time saver in that way. So when we select File, Import, and choose our Photoshop file, this allows us to choose which layers that we want to use. All right, so actually, I don't think I picked the right file. Hold on a second. So import to library, because I didn't have all my layers in there. That's what I thought. Let me see. Wait, maybe I just called it download. That's right, I couldn't rename it because it was already open, so I never actually saved it. Alright, so now if I come back here and then File, Import to Library, Wolf Demo. Now I have my layers. Alright, so I'm going to check them all off. My screen is a little cut off, but on the bottom here there's a button that says Import. Alright, so I'm going to press Import. And now if I come over to the side here, I should be seeing my panels, but I don't, so I'm going to select Window and then Library. I must have undocked it at some point. Alright, so notice in here, in our library, that you have a Photoshop document, which is like a composite of all the layers merged together. And then we have a folder in there, which shows us our different layers. So let's start here by just dragging our background layer onto our stage and positioning it. Alright, Dustin, it doesn't look like you resized your document size. So go up to the Modify pull down. You can stay and animate, you're fine. Go up to Modify, Document, and then for width you have 170, it should be, and height 168. Alright, so now we have this image in here, and we need to give it some interactivity. So what we're going to do is convert this to what's called a button, right? So we know that buttons you press, right, and you can become interactive. So to do that, we're going to go to Modify again, like we did before, but this time we're going to say Convert to Symbol. Alright, so it gives us a couple options for the type of symbol, and this is really important. So we do want it to be a button. Alright, and I always try to get in the habit of naming things so that when we have more than one type of item, you can, determine which is which. Alright, so now that we have this option here to create a button out of this, this image, we're going to press OK. And then what we're going to do is we're going to double click it. And what you'll see here is that your screen kind of changes. I'm going to try to collapse this stuff. So notice up here, right? When we double click it, it kind of expands. So what it's saying is that this button is within the scene, all right? And our timeline changes. So now instead of numbers being at the top of our timeline, we see we have up, over, down, and hit, all right? So you have to double click it.
Up, down, low, over, down.
So all we did was we selected the image, we went to Modify, and then Convert to Symbol. And this screen pops up, and you have to make sure that you're on button. Alright, and then as we're saying, when we double click it, then we see that now we're in our button editor. You should see that you have your timeline has changed. Yep, there you go. I can see it from here, right? So now what we're going to do is we are going to go in here and we're going to create this other appearance of our button. So I'm going to click on this square here under where it says over. I'm going to then right click and select insert keyframe. So what that's doing is it's going to put in another appearance of that. Alright, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my library and I'm going to find this wolf over and I'm going to drag it on top of it. So what's going to be happening is when we do up, it's going to be that. When we do over, it's going to be that. Or it's going to show that, right? So it's going to look like on screen that the image is changing, but really what we're doing is we're showing a different frame on kind of this mini timeline. Alright, so let me figure out this at this point to kind of really see it. So if let's save this file first before we go any further. So call this wolf demo also. So we have a couple files with the same name, but they're different types of files, so we're not really writing over them. Alright, and then if I do a control enter, it opens up in a little preview window, and we can see that when we just hover over it, it changes. Right, so we're seeing that our button actually works. So that's control enter, opens up this little preview window, and actually allows you to be interactive there with it. Control enter is kind of long, alright? So we're going to trim it down first, and I think this is going to be a good type of skill to learn, because you may get some sound quotes that are really long and you don't want the whole thing playing. So what I'd like you to do is go back to kind of that area where you downloaded the images. So shared, multimedia, animation, and then you're going to see a folder in here that's called Audacity Portable. Alright, this is an audio editing program which is free. You could actually take this whole folder, put it on a flash drive, and use it wherever, yeah.
I was actually going to ask you, do you want to create your login so I can download Audacity?
Well, we have a portable version on the server. Alright. So if you can navigate to this folder and double click the application that's in there.
Not the shortcut.
I don't know if that might work. I'm getting all these error messages, so we may have to go to a plan B. No, it's working alright. Alright, so here is our interface for Audacity. I'm using this for the demo because it's free and it's also a lot more user-friendly and easier to use than Audition is. So we're going to open the program, and then we're going to open that file that I had given you. Alright. When we look at this file, it's called a waveform. Alright, if you've never looked at a sound file before. Audition doesn't have a lot going on with it. We have some play buttons on the top. Alright. So basically a vertical line, or this line with the height, indicates that there's sound there. If there's a flat spot, that indicates silence. So I'm going to just use this selection tool. So if you look up on the toolbar, it looks like a letter I. I'm going to use that to click and drag to select the portion of this file, or this audio file, that we want to keep. Alright, and then I can go to the File menu and select Export Selection. Alright, if we did export, it would export the whole track, as it's called. But in this case, we just want to export what we have highlighted. Alright, so you can tell that it's highlighted because it's a darker color there. Alright, and then let's call this like Wolf New or something like that. And we're going to leave it as a WAV file and save it back to the desktop or wherever you're storing your files. Export selection. Alright, we highlighted this area on here because this is the only thing we want to keep. And then File, Export Selection. And then we're exporting it as a WAV file. All right, from there, we're going to go back to animate. And what do you think we're going to do? Did anybody, I didn't hear import, but that's what we want. We want to get it into the file to be used. So we're going to import to the library again.
Wait, this thing is not doing it though.
All right, so back in animate and back in our button editor, I'm going to go to the down state. I'm going to insert another keyframe. So that made a copy basically of that previous frame. And now from the library, that I should find my sound file, and I'm going to drag it onto the stage, not the timeline, because look, it doesn't allow us to put it in the timeline, right? So we just drag it up here, and then you should see on your timeline you have a little orange line indicating that we have a waveform in there. We test again. All right, hold on. All right, so we hover over it, we get no sound, but now we press down. All right, so we have the over and then the down. So in order to get this so that somebody could play it like online or something, we need to do what's called publishing it. Oh, there's a little asterisk up here next to the file name. Does anybody know what that means? This little asterisk here next to the file name? That means you have not saved it since your last change. So if you do a Control S, it goes away. All right. So that's kind of like a check for you. Should always save, right? Because things have sometimes go bad.
Actually, I didn't get a chance to tell you, but it's not making sound.
All right. At this, so it's viewable by somebody outside of this program, right? Meaning like we talk, it's the same kind of relationship between a PSD document and a JPEG, right? What's different between the two types of files? PSD and JPEG, what's the difference? Just a generic image, right? So you can edit a Photoshop document a lot more than a JPEG, right? Because it has layers. So this is creating, as you can see up here, an FLA file, all right? Animate has evolved from what's called Adobe Flash, so I think that's where that file extension comes from. When we publish this, we're going to create what's called an SWF file, which will open in Flash Player, which is basically in most web browsers. So if we go to File and Publish Settings, all right, all we want to do is make sure that that is selected, Flash or SWF. You can see all these other formats, which might work for if we just had animation, but since we have this interactive element to it, we need it to be a Flash file. All right, so just make sure you know where it's going, where it's called, and then on the bottom press Publish and OK to close it. And then what we should see is that we have this SWF file. Now yours might open up in a browser window, I'm not sure, but you should be, and you might actually have like an internet icon on here, because what I was seeing in AM is that I guess Flash Player wasn't installed on a lot of your computers, so it's not opening in this viewer. But that's if you were to right click it and go to Properties, where is it? It should say Flash Movie or SWF or something in there. All right. Did you publish? Yeah. But so you may have what I'm saying here is that since you don't have the Flash Player installed, you just get like an internet icon on there, right? Well, right click it and see what the properties are. All right, so once we uploaded that file into our drive, now I'm going to go, I kind of have all these. Well, we're not downloading it yet. That would be what somebody would do if they're reviewing your stuff. All right, so I know I put mine in a subfolder. So once that's in there, so You'll see it in your drive, something like this, right?
Yeah.
So now we're going to right click it. Come on, right click. And we're going to go to get shareable link. All right, now we want to make sure that it's public so that anybody can access it. Dustin, you with me? This is going to be part of your grade today so that it is viewable online. So I uploaded it to the drive, then I right clicked and went to get shareable link. Now I'm going to go to share settings because I want to make sure it's public. So this is what it should be saying. Anyone on the internet can find and view. If yours is not saying that, you go to advanced and change it so that it is public. All right, so you click the dot, you press save, then we can copy this link, and then from there, that's what we want. So if we went to Google Plus and did a posting, now you can add that as a link. And instead of having that really long URL, it says nicely, webdemo publish.swf. That's what I want to see today in your summary. Not,
It didn't make a short link.
it doesn't need to be a short link. All right, and you're, yeah, so, I guess you did it in 2 places.
I just copied and pasted.
I'm going to put my summary up there, which I think I'd like to see from everybody. And then go to find it.
Still says you have to download it when you open it.
Well, yeah, if you're testing it, yeah, because you can get a Flash Player plugin, but it's not totally a necessity for. All right, so this is what your summary should look like. I'm going to leave that up there. I'll zoom in so you can read the text a little better. All right, so I think this is a pretty good description, which hopefully kind of reviews the steps that we did so that you guys can do this again on your own. I am going to have the recording. I did the video of this, but and it is in notes, in text also. But I think if you guys write it down, it kind of makes it a little easier to see also. See that attachment?
Yeah.
You upload the file to the drive.
Yeah, I did that before.
So then you gotta get the shareable link too.
Yeah.
Share start file, so it's not just video. Let's try for that. No, just in your posting. But I wanna. You have a subfolder like a file. Upload that to your drive and get the link to that. It's got hieroglyphics, HTML. All right, after you're done with that, then now it's up to you to kind of work on your own individual project. Start preparing images, isolating them from the background, apply your color overlay. Sure. You get extra credit for that.
Instead of like a color overlay, can't you do like how it would be like a text?
Yeah, you could totally change the picture actually if you want. And I don't really care if your sound plays on the over or the down, if you have a preference to that, as long as you have this interactivity working. Yeah, I think somebody did something last year where when they hovered over it, the picture totally changed to something else. I should have my score sheet from last year. I'll take a look at that, and then that way see if I'm missing anything.